Hello, how are we? And I guess a happy Burns season to everybody. Cheers, Sanjivar.
Cheers.
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 So I hope everybody is well. And yeah, so Burns night was the other night, and it seemed as good a reason as any for us to have a quick get together and share a quick dram. I thought it was quite clever. I've called this this evening a Burns flight. I thought that was quite clever.
Yes. A good pun, a good play.
So how are you both? Are you well, Paul?
Just great, thank you. Enjoying northeastern weather here today and trying to warm my cockles with a little bit of drink from the Aaron Distillery today.
Excellent. So what do you have there then?
Well, I've got two out here. As I understand it, the Aaron Malt or the Isle of Aaron Distillery is, I guess, the closest to where Robbie Burns grew up or where he was born.
Okay.
So I thought I'd pull those out, and I've got both basically two sides to the tasting. I've got the La Cranza Reserve,
nice,
which is a non-age statement from Aaron, and this is basically a showcase of what the still can deliver. So it's not aged that long, but it gives you a lot of the fruitiness of their new make spirit with a little bit of the floral that comes with it. And on the other side, I have the Aaron Malt 18. Now, this is an older bottling, I think, from 2014 or somewhere around there, I believe. That's when I got it. And I just opened it a little while ago. So now we've got the spirit that's been sitting in cask for 18 plus years. And let's see what some oak aging can do to it. So two very nice, very different, but very enjoyable drinks.
Fantastic. I look forward to hearing about them. And Jeremy, how are you?
I'm very well. It's great to be live again. And it's only talking to you to say we need to do one. So I'm glad that we are here and enjoying the company of yourself and Paul. It's been too long. But yeah, I've got a couple of interesting one I'll keep hidden. But my first one tonight actually is an interesting one from A.D. Rattray, which I'll come on to. But before I do that, let's hand over to you, Mike, and tell us what you've got in store.
Thank you very much. Well, I thought I would start off with the Robert Burns. This is from the Isle of Arran, who I think have got the kind of trademark, so they're allowed to actually have Robert Burns' image and his name on this particular whiskey. This one here is the single malt that they have, but they also have a blended version as well. And actually, I bought this bottle for part of some filming that I was doing for the documentary about the hypnotist James Braid. And what I wanted to do was visit, there was a small link over with Braid and Burns. So I actually took this bottle to Burns's grave and I toasted him on his grave, took a sip and gave one to the bard on his graveside, which was quite nice. But I've just had that age-old problem. As I opened this bottle, I managed to drop my cork in it. So that's, I'm going to have to finish it now. So here we go. I'll have to finish it. I've got a couple of other options for what I have next, but this is a distillery that I visited for the first time this year, and I think it deserves some airtime, and it is the Oban 14. Delightful little dram, lovely little distillery, and that is what I'm going to be having. So I think the best way of doing this is we'll move in the same order again. We'll start with Paul, who will introduce us to his first dram, and then Jeremy will have his first, I'll have mine, and then we'll move back through again. So Paul, tell us about the La Cranza.
La Cranza, they want to highlight the lighter side of our vibrant island character and bottled at 43%. The reserve emphasizes the delicious, sweet, fruity notes, which are the hallmark of the distillery. And I certainly can't argue with that. On the nose, you get really nice orchard fruit there. A little bit of malt, of course. And certainly a little bit of sweetness. And as you go further along, there is a touch of oak. And I assume it's ex-bourbon because I'm getting some vanilla and some caramel there and a little bit of toast oak. And put it all together with a little bit of spice, a little bit of a peppery on the nose and on the tongue. It's really nice. It's certainly vibrant, but it's really great to have that spirit represented without having it being overburdened by oak. And I don't mean that in a negative way for the oak, but we always have this conversation all the time. What's better, young or old whiskey? There's no answer to that. What is great to emphasize is that there's an amazing amount of taste to have in a young whiskey if a distiller is doing the right thing with its spirit, which the Aaron really is. I bet. So for this one here, which I pull out from time to time to give someone the appreciation of a young, non-age statement whiskey, people say, well, it can't be that good, it doesn't have an age statement on it. Yes, it can. I mean, if you're looking for a lot of oak, you're looking at chewing on a barrel, you're not going to get it here. But boy, if you want vibrant flavors, you want to see what Aaron can do off the still, and with a little bit of time in a barrel, this is a good one. And I've got I think this is an older bottling as well. I can only assume that if it's still being produced, I don't know if it's a one-off. I assume it's part of their core at this point. Someone can correct me on that. But I really like it, and I serve it to a few people as they come along. People who really want to know, the difference between younger whiskeys, younger whiskeys, and older whiskeys, and this is a good punchy one to show that for sure.
Excellent, lovely. Very good, Jeremy.
Hi. Well, I've got tonight, Mike. This is a specialist company that goes back to the 1800s. And many people will know about certain private companies who take their casks and they'll put different whiskies in. And, you've got the Edinburgh, the Scottish Malt Whisky Society, they'll do their own cask and give them beautiful names and unusual names. I know they've had even one about the dentists, this and that. They take casks. There are Signatory, and there are other ones I've got on the shelf. But this company I really like, going back to the 1800s, and they're called A.D. Rattray. And they have casks from all different whiskies. Some are, very mature, many years, and you can buy them, and they have a good selection. And sometimes a little unusual as well. I mean, I have to be honest, when I actually came across this, I thought, Glendullan. Now, Glendullan is the distillery, and it's sold in the United States, I believe, and maybe Paul will be able to tell me about that, under the Glendullan name, but it's not often used in England, in the UK, or in Scotland. But it is very well known because its other name is, everyone will know, is the Singleton. And Glendullan is from the distillery, and it's a 10-year-old, cask strength at 58.9, and it's a 10-year-old, and it's distilled in 2010 and bottled 2021. I know they're one-offs, these, because they obviously have their, a few hundred bottles, and I do like them. It's interesting. When you take it, it's light. It's pear drops. It's like almost, when I actually just was nosing this before, my mind went back to, going into the old sweet shops and, you ask for a quarter of pear drops. And when you nose it, immediately that comes. And there's obviously oaky, and you look at the color of it, it's been done, in probably bourbon cask. It says a bourbon hogshead, and it's sweet. You get you nose it, and really, as I say, it's overpowering with pear. And there's a sharp tartiness as well from the oak. And it's light and it's refreshing, and as that tartiness subsides, a warm afterglow, floral notes carry on. you know, right through it. And it's just an easy dram to drink. But the kind of dram you give to somebody who's, you know, I'm not sure if I like some of the full-bodied Islays, or, you know, you can give them this, and it's a great introductory whiskey to try. I admit, you know, for the uninitiated, it may be a little strong with the alcohol, but a cracker. And I do like Rattray because they really are, they do lots of affordable malts. And I know that Paul just said about age statements. This is 10-year-old, so it's okay, but they've done some, you know, even 6-year-olds. You know, you think, well, a 6-year-old, what's the point? I've got one on the shelf here at Benriach. You know, it doesn't matter about the age statement, it's the whiskey. And this is a cracker, you know, and 50 quid a bottle, I'm not sure, but it's great value. And so sometimes when people look for a whiskey and they think, oh, I'll pay 80, 90, 100 pounds up for the actual name one from the distillery, go and look elsewhere for someone like Rattray, and you'll get some great value malts. But there you go. I mean, slange. Okay.
Slange. Fantastic. And I think what you're saying is really true. I mean, as I say, I bought this Robert Burns whiskey because I had an intent, I had a purpose for it. It was only about 25 quid, which I think is an absolute bargain. It's a steal. You know, an Arran single malt whiskey for £25. That's a bargain. And I think Arran are very clever. You know, the price point they've got at it, the fact that it's you know, they've got it endorsed by the World Burns Federation. That means they can use the image and the title, and they're going to sell. You know, people will sell them, but people will buy them because they want to toast Robbie Burns on Burns Night or any kind of Scottish themed evening. And it just so happens it's actually a very nice little dram as well. It's really nice. It's very light. It's again, for somebody, I guess, who is introducing to whiskey, it'd be a very good kind of entry whiskey. It's quite citrus, fruity, apple, pear on the nose. Also getting vanilla. The apples are very much there as well, lime as well, and at the finish, kind of cinnamon, a bit spicy. Very acceptable, very nice, light little whiskey. I think it's 43%, and it is delicious, very, very nice. So I'm a huge fan of Arran, as Paul is. And if you haven't tried the Robert Burns single malt, I would certainly recommend it. Now I'm going to have an attempt at a Burns poem here. It's only a few verses long, so if you bear with me. We are the Dentistry Whiskey Appreciation Society, and I'm going to cheat because I'm going to read it, but I am going to give an address to the toothache. Okay. My curse upon your venomed stang that shoots my tortured gums a-lang, and through my lug skis mony a twang when gnawing vengeance, tearing my nerves with bitter pang like racking engines. When fevers burn or argues freezes, rheumatics gnaw or colic squeezes, or neighbours' sympathy can ease us with pitying moan. But thee, thou hell of all diseases, I mocks or groan. Adown my beard the slavers trickle, I throw the wee stools o'er the mickle, while round the fire the giglets keckle to see me loup, while raving mad I wish a heckle were in their doubt. In all the numerous human duels, ill-hearst daft bargains cutty stools, or worthy friend rack I the moles, sad sight to see. The tricks of knaves or fascia fools, thou bear'st the gree. Where'er that place be priests call hell, where all the tones of misery yell, and ranked plagues their numbers tell in dreadful raw, thou, toothache, surely bear'st the bell among them all. O thou grim mischief-making chiel that gars the notes of discord squeal, till daft mankind after dance a reel in gore, a shoe thick, gie a' the fays of Scotland wheel, a towman's toothache. We toast to Robbie Burns, the bard. I understand about 70% of that. So hopefully, if you get 50%, I'm happy with that.
Has anybody tried putting that through Google Translator?
Do you know there's a comedian called what's his name? A Scottish comedian. I'll get his name in a minute, but he talks about German society doing Ode to Haggis. But he said the problem was it was translated into German. And the German person said, no, we want the proper English version. So they actually, instead of getting the original, they translated it back into English from German. So the person stood up and said, fear for your honest son's face. So your honest face. And he says, what was it he says? Great. So the line "Great Chieftain of the Pudding Race" basically retranslated as "Mighty Führer of the Sausage People." So "Mighty Führer of the Sausage People." So that's not quite what Burns meant, I don't think. Excellent. So you're number two.
Number two is the Aaron 18. So this one was limited to 9,000 bottles at the time. So if you look at the color, it's ex-sherry. Mm-hmm. So I assume that it's probably American oak sherry. Now what's interesting is that you still get those nice orchard fruit and citrus notes that you get off the Aaron. But now you got a little more chocolate and a little coconut and some vanilla, of course, and not a really heavy, we're not looking at that Christmas cake kind of thing that you get from a hard sherry, but it's very pleasant and very well balanced. It's really interesting. I pulled this bottle out a couple on Burns night, and I remember I hadn't had it open for a while. And when I popped it and let the glass rest for a bit, I was surprised at how far the aromas carried out of that glass. Now, sometimes you pour a glass and you might, get a little aroma of it as you walk by it or sit next to it. But I poured it and I walked away to the bar. And as I was approaching, my table here, I could actually smell this whiskey. It was just started to just blow up into the room, which is, I think amazing to think that number one, it could just, permeate into a room so quickly, but also so pleasantly. And so when I approached the glass for my first sip, it just made it so much better. I haven't had one of their newer ones. I noticed that because we don't have it at the bottle shop here. I noticed that the new Aaron 18s online, when you see the bottle, are quite dark. So I suspect and Aaron does not use any coloring or chill filtration at this point, as I understand it. The newer 18 certainly going to be a little different from this, so I can't wait to try them. And I suspect those will probably have a little more European oak, a bit of a deeper sherry flavor than what this is. That being said, this is also very nice because you have that effect of aging, and it really does. The backbone reminds me of the younger La Crianza Reserve.
Fantastic. Jeremy.
Interesting. You were talking about different sherries, and I find it all fascinating. And I am, particularly when I go back through years of Glenfarclas and the family cask, it's quite incredible to see the different colours of the whiskey. And I took part in a tasting during lockdown, and different years. Some of them were really quite pale, and it all comes down to whether refill cask. And to be honest, you do get more of the whiskey the paler it is. First fills can be, and I do love them. I've got to be honest, I really do like the heavily dark, almost brown, maroon, heavily, first fill. But actually, to get the real, nuances of the whiskey, so it's not overpowered by the sherry. Getting refill second or even a third refill really does give you more scope. What I'm going to today is not sherry, and is an absolute cracker. Every year, Diageo, being the commercial side of things, obviously they bought lots of distilleries, and well-known probably, real, I suppose if a whiskey is called meat, I'm sure that you say it's real meat, and I know you like them. There you go. This is a cracker. Okay, and it's Mortler, and that was my watch, by the way. Even though I think it actually would like a wee dram, and it's a 13-year-old, and it's special release for 2021, and it's absolutely magnificent. I do like, as you know, the heavily alcoholed, a cask strength. They never used to do these each year, but now they are. And last week I tried it, and it is called the Beast, and it's got a lovely picture of the beast, or looks like a wolf or something like that, howling in the night, and it is the Beastie. And very interesting because the distillery is old in Dufftown. I walked past it, and it many a time actually, and it goes back to about 1823, and there were probably distilleries there beforehand, and it's all very closely nestled with, obviously, the Singleton and Dufftown distilleries are all close, and it's a real traditional whiskey, and it's described as meaty and the Beastie, and it really is. Like it says, you drink this, and it's heavy. It's not light like the dull, and you can taste this. And when you, as I will in a second, put it into your mouth, first thing you notice, it's so smooth. It's like James Bond. I like smooth whiskies. And this is it's like silky smooth, sophisticated. And then as the alcohol leaves you, and the smoothness, and it's very interesting because it is heavily alcoholed at 55, but it's very, very smooth. And then after that, you start to get a spicy kind of sophistication coming through afterwards. It really is an absolute pleasure. And I know that they make a lot of marketing by it's 2.7 times distilled, and they've got various different shaped stills there, triangular, some with a narrow neck, and the so-called wee witchy, which is a very small, and it's a very complex distillery. It goes from, they take 80%, and then 20% goes into the wee witchy, which doesn't have copper in it. Therefore, you get a bit of sulfury type flavor, but you can't really taste the sulfur. I can't. It's so smooth, and I have had some whiskies which are heavily sulfured, but this isn't at all. You can't really even taste it. But it all adds to the experience, and you get a bit of vanilla there and a bit of floral. It's really complex, but it's worth splashing out, and it's about 130 quid, I think, something like that price for the bottle. And it's for you, Mike, and I know you like him. You've I think had on here a 12-year-old Mortlach before, and you've talked about it. This is one really to say, yeah, I'll get hold of a bottle. And I think they're selling fast because obviously it's limited release, 13 years, and it's just one of the most magnificent whiskies I've ever tasted. And I like my Sherrod, but this is a real cracker. There you go. I don't know if you get the special releases over the water in Nova Scotia. We're lucky, I suppose, in the UK to have all these different expressions. I don't know if Diageo send them overseas or not, or they're kept for the UK market. I really don't know that.
I got into an interesting conversation with the brand ambassador about allocations and how allocations we're not getting what we used to, but as a business, you want your allocations to go where it makes the most business sense. So we've been fighting to get Bunnahabhain over here. We've been fighting to get some Aaron's, and they're starting to come back in after a bit of a reprieve. And Nova Scotia hasn't had, it's what I found over the last number of years. Nova Scotia has had their whiskey festival, and when they've had the festival, they've managed to bring in some very different various whiskeys from around the world. Hadn't had the whiskey festival for a couple of years because of COVID, and I find that what's available at the stores now are really dried up and starting to come back. One of the advantages we've had now, though, is that interprovincial trade has relaxed because of COVID, and we can start getting some whiskeys from other provinces if you follow the right protocols. So allocation for a country as big as ours can differ between the East Coast and the West Coast or Central. So we've had the opportunity to get some different things over the last 6 months by hitting some allocations from out West. Back further to what you said, though, about the Singleton, that was in Canada. You see that Singleton of Glenord, Singleton of Dufton, Singleton of Glendullan. So they and the packaging was almost the
yeah.
Yeah, the spirit was different in each one, not as different as you might think from my palate, and price competitive for sure. But the packaging was actually kind of the one didn't look a whole lot different than the other. In fact, when we had the Glendullan and the Dufton on the shelf, you had to look close to see that you're buying one versus the other. And if you poured two of them out, there wasn't a ton of difference. But at $60 Canadian when they were available, it wasn't a bad price for a 12-year-old single malt.
Yeah.
In Canada.
I mean, it often comes up thinking about what you've just said about how much you pay for whiskey, and it's always a difficult one. I'm in a position, and I just buy. I have, like many people, I like to go to the distilleries and buy the distillery-owned ones because it is, at the end of the day, it's barley, malted barley, water. And at the end, I do like to go and get, for the sheer heck of it, is go to a distillery and buy the distillery-only ones. And I must admit, this Diageo is absolutely, they are marketing like crazy. I mean, I used to go to, every year I've been going for 30 odd plus years to a lot of these distilleries. And for years I used to pray that Royal Lochnagar, which was probably the closest one to where I go each year, to a timeshare at Ballater, it's just outside near where the Queen goes every year. And I used to go to that distillery, and they would have their core range, but very little, and they'd have some from their sister distilleries. But now, one year I find for a few years they suddenly upped it, and they'd have a distillery only 48%. And now, in the last year or so, all of the distilleries, even Cardew, even Glenkinchie, which is, I know, not too far from you, Mike, they're all doing now at the distillery only cask strength, which I've prayed for years. So, and now that they come out with these special releases as well for the larger market, and I think it's fabulous that you're getting these, really fabulous malts, available to give you differences. But over to you, Mike. I've taken up too much time.
No, it's okay. I was just going to say my only issue that I take with that is you get your hands on a bottle like that, you bring it home, open it, and you think this is the best whiskey I've ever had, and you can never get the blinking thing again.
Yes.
You want to buy two when you have a chance.
Well, that's it. Yeah.
You're 100% right. You do. This is an absolute cracker. As I said, one of the best I've ever tasted. Certainly for a non-sherrod. And, I just think this beastie is just, it seems suitable. Like James Bond has been put off and put off and put off until it came this year. And although I thought the film was great, I didn't like the ending. And I won't spoil it for anybody.
I've still not seen it, so don't. Yeah.
I wouldn't. But it's a fantastic, this is so smooth. And I would say to my whiskey esteemed colleagues, if you can get hold of a bottle of this, you won't regret it.
I'm glad you cut short on the quote though, because you when you were originally saying it, you said this is like James Bond, and I'm just glad you didn't say like James Bond in my mouth, which I thought was where you were going with it. So.
Oh no, I should have said it's like chiffon. It's like it's the finest silk. It's amazing, and I do like talking about distillation. They make a whole thing of 2.7, and it's very complex. So as I say, it goes into this the wee witchy, but I do like Irish whiskies, which are very, very smooth, triple distilled. And I know Auchentoshan, and you've got a couple of them in Scotland, but most of them are. And I was lucky. You talked about your famous Scots. I came across literally by accident. The great thing about lockdown is that you had to go in your own country traveling instead of going abroad. And I must admit, I've just come back from a cruise, believe it or not. Around Jamaica and the Bahamas, and what an experience that was. Namely, that I got there and I got back with 100,000 tests, but even so, it was fabulous. But during lockdown, I've been all over the place, and I went, I think, was it 3 or 4, 5 times in 1 year into Scotland. And one place I'd never been, and it's like I thought 130, 140, 50 miles or something from Glasgow, down a one-way street, is to go to Campbelltown. There's no easy ways, most beautiful scenery, but on the way we stopped in the Trossachs, and I found this is what I love about Scotland. You know, you go somewhere and you come across something, and you had a wee dram. I didn't have a wee dram, but I went to visit Rob Roy and his grave, and you come across this wee church, and it's just magnificent. And going down to Campbelltown to go also to an odd distillation with Springbank, and so I went there, and it was magnificent. It's well worth the trip, and there's fabulous beaches around, and go in the height of summer, but it's a long way to just go for a weekend or anything. It's a long drive, but it's fabulous.
Well, here's a wee interesting fact for you. Rob Roy McGregor is my 8 times great-grandfather.
Well, I've been to visit his grave.
I've been.
It's for the McGregors. I mean, it is. Yeah, I've got lots of pictures there. We loved it, my wife and I, going there. And Springbank is it's going back in time. They do things the old way, and you can buy special bottles there where they literally would pull 2 out of a cask. And I got one of them because they put them in this cage of a cupboard, and I went on the tour, and they'd gone when I come back, and I wanted a sherry one, and one of the guys went upstairs and said, "You can have mine. I've been saving." He says, "I can get another one." And I thought it was extremely kind of it, but that's yet to be opened somewhere on my shelf. And
Paul, obviously, you spent a huge amount of time out in Springbank as well. Actually.
Yeah, I worked there for a week. Yeah. That and Aaron are 2 places closest to my left ventricle. It's the people, and it's not just the whiskey, which is obviously amazing, but the town and the people, the people working there. It's that Scottish people are some of the most warming, beautiful people in the world. Campbelltown and the people of Springbank exemplify that. I mean, it's times 100. I get gushy when I talk about Springbank, and it's not just the whiskey; it's the distillery, it's the people.
Yeah, I think, and that actually brings me on nicely to talk about my last one, the Oban one, because we visited there. It must be, when was it? We went October, I think, so just a few months back. We had a few nights in Oban, and I'd never been to Oban Distillery before. I kind of thought, I hope the distillery is not too far from town, so I might be able to persuade my family to let me visit at some point during the holiday. And I had no idea the distillery is smack bang in the middle of town. It's right there. So if you're staying in Oban, you walk past it every time you go out to the shops. And it's it's the original old building, obviously, but similar to what you were saying, it's when that was set up and established, it was never established with thoughts of tourism in mind. It is the working distillery as it was built back in the day, and they've had to try and shoehorn in a little area for the tourists and how they take you around. And it's a small distillery, compared to other distilleries, it is a small distillery.
Mm-hmm.
And that really made me, and I'd never really even tried Oban 14 before. It was never something that was really on my radar. And it's a beautiful whiskey, and it travels well. I mean, it's all over the world, this whiskey from this tiny little distillery. They've really, because again, they don't have a massive range Oban, but what they do really, really well.
Mm-hmm.
It's also a Diageo distillery, I think, isn't it?
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's on the nose. It's quite a sweet whiskey, so kind of toffee from it. A little smokiness as well. And I think one of the things I get most of all from this is the kind of mouthfeel. It's really creamy, quite kind of oily. It's quite a kind of full feeling in the mouth. Marmalades, toffee apple. So it's that kind of sweet but citric taste as well. A pretty long finish as well. You get the kind of toasty oak and the spice kind of coming through on the finish. But it's just fabulous, and it is a wonderful colour as well. I'll bring my screen out so I can show you the bottle. There we go. So it's what I would call a kind of iron brew colour. I don't know where that is. I don't know where that is in the range, but again, no idea if they use any caramelization or any colorings or anything in there. But it is a beautiful color. So I entirely surprised. You have your favorite whiskies and the ones that are your go-tos, and I think visiting a distillery makes a massive impact on your emotional connection with the whiskey. Would I enjoy the Oban 14 as much if I didn't have that connection and that enjoyment of the experience of being in Oban, which is just a delightful place to visit, and being in this beautiful, quaint old distillery? I'm not sure. I don't know. It's a great whiskey, but every time I drink that now, it takes me back to being in Oban and just having a great family holiday there. It's wonderful.
And I went. It was interesting you mentioned Oban, because on my trip to Campbelltown, we did. I spent a couple of nights 2 or 3 nights in Oban, and we went right up to look at it's magnificent. And we went over to Mull for the day.
Yeah.
Which is just fabulous to go to Tobermory.
Love to get there.
And,
yeah, superb.
And it was interesting. There's a place, and I daren't even pronounce it, where I actually stayed 6 miles outside Campbelltown, and there's the most incredible beaches and golf course, like something like Macranish or something. Macranish. Yes, and we stayed there because I actually had a sister hotel booked in the centre of Campbelltown, and I went into the room and I said there was something wrong with the drains or something, and I just said, came out, and I remembered when I was looking to stay there, so we stayed out, and it was just fabulous. It was a great hotel, and it was during lockdown, so they weren't that busy, and it was magnificent. And I would say to anybody who's joining us this evening, if you want to go to a special place, go to Campbelltown. You go to Glen Scotia and as well, and they've got their Kilkerran distillery, which is interesting because Springbank own it, and they opened the Kilkerran, didn't they? Because they needed 3
to keep the region.
And there was, apparently, it was the whiskey capital. There was well over 30 distilleries at one time in that area, and down to a few. But it's that was one of my delights of lockdown, and I'll thank COVID for that, if nothing else.
What do you think caused the decline of the whiskey in Campbelltown, Paul? Did you get a sense of why that? Why there were so many? Was it just because there was closures everywhere at the time and they get hit harder?
No, they're punching out garbage whiskey is what it was.
Right.
So Campbelltown was just a hop, skip, and a jump relatively to North America. and there was like 36 plus whiskey distilleries in Campbelltown. You know, they had the Campbellton Lock, and they had the workforce, they had the port facilities there, so they could cook it up and send it off. But what happened was, you know, they were getting, the market was so big for it, they were punching out like a lot of spirit, and it wasn't that great. And then, of course, as international travel opens up, there's other places to get it, and then Campbelltown just drives up, leaving only Glen Scotia and Springbank for a number of years until Frank McCarty opened up the Kilcairn. So you know, it's you know, when you get down there and realize it's a very small town, do you imagine 36 distilleries like operating there? I can't imagine how bustly it would have been back, you know, in 100 years ago.
Yeah,
absolutely. Well, hopefully, I don't know. Is there any talk of any others coming back? I thought I heard rumors about another one.
Oh, well, I hadn't heard anything. Mind you, I haven't been on to Campbelltown for what, 3 years now, so I hadn't heard anything about it in particular.
That could have been a dream, of course. That's
well, I mean, you know, you look at Isla. Isla's yet another distillery on there. Yeah, that's coming up, and there's more opening up. So, you know, while we're in this whiskey, you know, I hate to say this, but this whiskey renaissance. Well, look, it's almost a business renaissance. But that being said, there's good product out there. You know, if you have Campbelltown as being, you know, a mecca, you know, much like Isla is, you know, in its own right, why wouldn't you turn around and start making more whiskey there? If you have the facilities, you have the manpower, you have a history, you have a geographic region, you know, through the Scotch Whisky Association, it would be crazy not to, provided that you see the future whiskey not becoming another lock within the next 5 to 10 years.
Yeah, I think you're right. And today you posted something on the whiskey about the Hakushu, which is, I've had a bottle of the 12-year-old. I'm not a lover of, and I'm pretty critical sometimes of the Japanese whiskies. Very underwhelming as my overall, and I've been to some really specialist whiskey places in London and been treated to some beautiful, so-called beautiful whiskies, but I've never been bowled over. Nick at the barrel, it's fine, it's okay, the light, and it's kind of trying to reinvent the wheel. Well, you know, I have to say, Mike, you live in whiskey heaven, and I think everybody who tries to recreate whiskey, unless it's a different product, and I will say the Canadians produce a different product, the same way as the Irish do. And if I think about other whiskies, so fair dues.
Jeremy's checking his watch there.
Yeah, we're probably, you know,
we might actually achieve our swiftest ever flight. I think we've done really well. We've got through 6 whiskies in 45 minutes. I think that is a new record.
Yeah, I've really enjoyed it again. We must do this more.
Let's do it again. The other one I was going to mention just very briefly, because we're on the Burns theme, and I happen to know the people involved at the distillery, is the Loch Lee, which is an old farm where Burns used to live. So they've just started producing, and obviously you're utilizing the history of Burns' connection with the farm as part of their marketing as well. So I've not tried that, so that'll be very interesting.
Well, it's been fun. I'll toast you guys. Great.
Toast you, and a toast to Ravi Burns, the Bard.
Absolutely. Thanks for this evening.
Cheers, gents. We'll see you again. Thanks very much, Paul. Thank you, Jeremy.
Bye-bye.
Thanks, guys.
Good night, guys. Cheers, everybody out there. Have a good weekend.